Hi everyone, Savannah here, and today we're drawing a spooky Halloween night, a little trick-or-treater walking up to a mysterious glowing house. Everything you need to follow along is linked down below. That includes the free brush that I use, the color palette, and sketch template. So let's go ahead and jump right on in. Let's go ahead and start by changing that background. So click into layers, click background color, and in the color palette section, we're going to grab this dark blue color for that background. Then go ahead and create a new layer, bring it below the outline layer, and let's go ahead and work on the house. Now we are going to do a reddish color for this house. There are two different color reds you can use. I went with the dark red orange color. For this house, you could go a little bit lighter if you want to, but I'm going to darken the color of the house at the end even more, as you can see in the bottom left image. But for now, let's go ahead and trace and fill in the majority of the house where this red color is going to be going. So anywhere that's not a roof, you can go ahead and fill it in with this red color. And I'm not worrying too much about the edges where the bushes are going to be, the gutters are going to be, or the roof, because those layers will be above this house. So don't worry too much about those edges. Now let's go ahead and create a new layer and add these gutters. I'm using the dark yellow color for this. It's not going to look super greeny yellow in the end image, as you can see in the bottom left picture. But if you want to go a little bit spookier, you can. I do end up changing the coloring a little bit on this house, making it a little bit darker, and you'll see that towards the end of this video. But feel free to use any colors you want for this house. We're just going to go with this, or I'm just going to go with this from the color palette, and I'm going to fill in the gutters, and then we'll jump to the roof next. Now when I'm done with these lines, I'm going to drag and drop the color into the empty spaces. Now to do that, make sure there's a couple things that you have done. One is make sure that those spaces are completely closed off. If not, it's not going to fill in just that space, it's going to fill in that entire shape. Now the other thing is when you drag and drop that color, hold it down for a second and you have a little bit of a slider. You could go left or right depending on how much or little you want filled. Play around with that because with these brushes there is a textured edge, and if you don't have it filled in enough, you might have to go around the edges and touch those up. So just slide that left and right to get to the fill that you want it to look, and then you should be good to go. We're going to do the same thing here now with this roof, and I actually created this new layer between the red house layer and those green gutter layers because I want those gutters to be in front of that roof. So I'm doing that same technique. I'm just creating these spaces. I grab this darker brownish color and I'm filling in the roof with that color. And then I'm adding a little bit of the roof here, the underside of the roof, because it's looking a little empty. So I'm going to do that and then we'll move on to the next step. And I'm just going to touch up a few spots here before I move on to that next step. Now let's create a layer right above that red house layer, set it to Clippy Mask, and we're going to work on this window here. So grab that dark yellow color that we used for the gutters, and then we're going to trace and fill in the shape of that. Then we'll create another layer that we will add in the light and the glow and this shadowy figure here. Now go ahead and click on that red house layer again, click new layer, and it will automatically set that to clipping mask. Then we're going to grab this orange color and fill it in. This will be the light from this window. Then we're going to add another new layer after we fix up the roof if you need to touch that up. Right above that yellow that we just added, grab that dark gray brownish color, and we're going to fill in the shape of this figure here. Once you're done kind of touching up the shape of the figure, we're going to add in their eyes. So I'm grabbing that orange color again. I'm grabbing a circle blend brush for this, and I'm just going to place the eyes. Now I'm going very lightly as much as I can with this yellow. I will tone this down a little bit by grabbing that darker black color and these in-between colors. But we're just going to place this yellow. It's much larger than what the eyes are actually going to be because I want these eyes to be glowing. So I'm kind of spreading that out a little bit, and then we'll add a very bright yellow towards the center. And this circle blend brush is pressure sensitive, so that's why I'm able to blend these colors very nicely. I don't have to press too hard to blend. If you want more of that pigment to come through, then yes, you'll want to press a little bit harder, but I'm not pressing too hard to pull that color in, and that just helps it blend even better. Now let's go back to that orangey yellow layer. I'm just going to add a little bit more of this bright yellow that we have selected. I'm still using that circle blend brush. I'm just very lightly making these vertical lines just to give it a little bit of variation. Now I'm happy with how this figure is looking, so I'm going to move on and add in some more trim here. So I'm grabbing that dark yellow color, going back to that same layer that we had the window trim on. I'm going to add trim to the rest of the house. Now I'm doing this all in the same layer. You could do these on separate layers if you want to, but I'm doing it all in the same layer, and I'm using that circle brush for this. Now I know that it is a little hard to see where the trim is supposed to go from the sketch, but I promise it will start making sense as we fill this in. Now let's go ahead and add in the door. I'm going to use the brown color, and I'm going to do this on a separate layer right below the trim, so you can click onto the shadowy figure and add a new layer, and I'll put it right between those two layers. We're just going to fill in the door here. Now I'm going to add a little bit of detail to the door. I'm grabbing the dark red orange color, the circle blend brush, and I'm setting this layer to alpha lock. I'm just going to start adding in a little bit of this reddish brown color to the surface of the door. Then I'm going to grab that brown color we used before to soften it just a little bit, and then I'm going to use this for the inner part of the door, kind of where the detail work is. So I'm just going to trace and fill in that shape all on that same layer. And now I'm just going to touch up with that dark red orange color again. Any spots that look a little too bright for me on the door, and then around the edge of the detail work here, I'm going to touch that up as well. Let's go ahead and add the window part to the door. I'm using the square brush for this. I'm grabbing the orange color and I'm just going to place the windows on the door. Same thing, I'm doing this all on the same layer as I did the detail work. We're not doing too many details on this door, so doing it on the same layer is absolutely fine. But if you want to do these on separate layers, you can. You can also do the windows on a separate layer and then add a glowy effect to it if you want to. I don't necessarily do that for this drawing, mainly because I have a street light that I'm using as my glowy part of the scene. But for the windows, if you want to add even more glow from the window, you can do that as well. Now I'm just adding one last little piece of trim to the house, and then I'm going to darken the red in specifically corners of the house, but then overall I'm going to darken the red. So I'm grabbing that dark reddish brownish color using the circle blend brush and setting that red house to alpha lock, so I'm not going outside the lines. I'm going to start, like I mentioned, in the corners and add in this color and blend it out. So I'm just darkening up the red section. Now I am going to add window to the left here of the house as well. So I'm grabbing that orange color and I'm doing this on the same layer that we did the window for where the shadowy figure is. And then I'm going to be using a blue, that dark blue that we use for the background as curtains. And it's going to be sheer curtain. So I'm using the circle blend brush and I'm just very lightly adding in some of that curtain here. I have other tutorials on how to do curtains in some of my other videos, but you're just going to, because it's pressure sensitive, just very lightly add that sheer curtain over top. And I'm just going to keep building up this section here, adding a little bit of yellow. I want the windows to the left to be more closed, so I want less light to come through than this one on the right. But I'm just going to keep building up this layer, adding a little bit of light, like I said, to this right window, and making it look like these windows are there. There's light coming through, but not much. I want them to be a little bit darker, a little bit spookier, like they're almost peeking through, but trying to be discreet. So I want these curtains to be very closed. Now let's go ahead and create a new layer. I'm doing this above the gutter layer, and we're just going to trace and fill in the shape of this kid that's trick-or-treating. We're using that same dark red color that we've been using for the shadowy figure because we're going to have light, so light kind of coming down on this kid, and so I want it to be dark, like you're really focused in on where this kid is walking up to. And his arm was a little too long for my liking here, it just didn't look natural. So I'm going to just move it up a little bit. I'm just grabbing that S tool there to select, and then I'm just moving it up just a smidgen because it was too long. Now let's go ahead and create a new layer. We're going to do this above the gutters, but below the boy here, the trick-or-treater here. And we're going to work on the sidewalk and the street as well. We're doing that all on the same layer. I'm grabbing this yellowy orange color and I'm using the circle brush for this. Actually, I'm going to use a square brush for this, and I'm going to fill in the sidewalk here that is leading up to this house and the street as well with this color. And originally I made the sidewalk wider, but I actually narrowed it and moved it to the right a little bit more because I wanted it to be kind of a sense of it feeling a little off, because I want this house to be spooky. So I moved it over to the right, off-centered with the stairs. And then I'm just going to fill in, like I said, the shape of the sidewalk and the ground here. Now let's go ahead and grab a dark color. So we're going to do that dark gray color and just add the front of the sidewalk here to give it a little bit of a shadow, and then we'll touch it up around where the sidewalk meets the street. And I'm using the circle brush. I'm just going a little bit around the edge of the sidewalk here to break it up just a smidgen with that circle brush and with that dark gray color. Now let's add a new layer right above the layer we just created. Grab that dark yellow color and we're going to add the grass in front of the house here. And we're just going to make it just a rectangular shape, nothing too fancy. We're going to go around the sidewalk that we just created. Because this layer is on top of that sidewalk, we just have to be mindful of our edges here. Now on the same layer as that trick-or-treater, grab that dark gray color and we're going to add in the power lines here on that same layer. Now on a new layer behind the house, so the very bottom of all the other layers, we're going to add this tree to the back left here, and we're going to start with the dark gray color using that circle blend brush, but we will lighten up just a little bit, adding in some of the other greeny colors, but start with that dark gray color first and that circle blend brush and start adding in that tree. Now I'm just going to grab a dark yellow color and just add a little bit of color variation. You don't have to go too crazy with it. We don't have to add too many details, but just a little bit of color variation is fine. Now add a new layer above the grass layer that we have here. Grab that dark yellow color. We still have that circle blend brush and we're going to fill in the shape of the bushes here. So we have two bushes, the ones on the left here and then also ones on the right of the sidewalk. Just go ahead and fill it in. I'm using that circle blend brush because I want a little bit of pass through that you can see through, right? With bushes, they don't fully fill in the shape there. And so I want a little bit of that passing through that you can see maybe parts of the house. But we're going to build this up so it does match the color of the grass. Don't worry, we're going to add in more colors to this, but we're just filling in the shapes for now and then we'll add in those details. Now go ahead and alpha lock that layer, grab that dark gray color, and towards the bottom, add in more of that dark gray color and then soften it as you go towards the top. So we're using that circle blend brush. Again, it's very pressure sensitive, so you can press harder towards the bottom and then lighter towards the top to blend it out further, but we're just going to darken it up towards the bottom and then go a little bit lighter towards the top to blend it. Now let's add in another color. I'm going to actually add in that dark red orange color because I want a little bit of color variation and I'm just going to fill it in. I'm mainly going in the middle in between section from that dark color before you get to that lighter greenish color, just to give it a little bit of color variation. I'm just doing these kind of vertical lines almost like they're sticks maybe, but I'm just going to add a little bit of that and then fill it in with a little more bushiness of that brush. Now with that dark gray color, bring that brush size down. We're still using that circle blend brush. Turn the alpha lock layer off and we're just starting to do these lines coming up out of that dark gray area, almost like there's sticks kind of sticking up, twigs kind of poking out. I wanted to give this a little bit of like a pokey feel, make it a little bit more uneasy of a bush. Of course, it would have like a really weird, creepy, pokey bush leading up to this creepy house. So that's what I'm trying to go for. So I'm going to add in some of the dark gray color. I'll add a little bit of that red color and then a little bit of that yellowy greeny color as well, just to give it a little bit more of a creepy vibe. Now let's go to that grass layer and we're going to add in some color variation. I'm going to grab the orange color. I'm grabbing that square blend brush and I'm just adding in a little bit of the orange over top of it and I'm focusing more towards the center as well. I'm going to brighten up the center area where that sidewalk is because that's where that light's coming down. So as you can see in that bottom left image, we have that light source coming down right on top of where the kid is walking. And so I'm making it brighter there and then darkening it out towards the edges. And I'm just pulling in a lot of the colors from the color palette. Feel free to pull any of them that you want to. I'm just doing these horizontal lines across the surface of it with that square blend brush and just playing around with the pressure that I'm using for each of these strokes. So if I want to go a little bit darker, I'll press down a little bit more on that color. If I want to brighten up certain sections, then I'll use those colors and lightly add in a brighter section. But feel free to play with these colors. And then I did try to add these kind of grass blades to the surface. I ended up not liking it, so I kind of went over it with the colors later. But if you want to add them, this is the technique I use. I just grabbed the colors that I put down on the grass and just did these kind of upward lines here. But again, I didn't like how I was looking, so I just kind of drew over them and erased them. And then we're using that dark gray color to add a little bit of shadow from the power line here. And then one thing I realized, I forgot to add in the shadow for the trick-or-treater. So if you want to do that when we're working on the sidewalk, you can do that as well. Now for the street, I didn't do too much detail. I just added one of the other colors and added a little bit of color variation with that square blend brush. And now we'll work on the sidewalk. Again, didn't do too many details, but I am adding a little color variation and then drawing a few lines to make it look like there's a separation as if they're concrete sections. So I'm just going to do that. I'm going to set this layer to alpha lock. I'm just going to start adding in a little bit of detail here. And I'm just gonna pull in some brown as well. Again, pull in any of the colors that you want to. We're just doing these color variations. I'm doing horizontal lines for that color variation. Now on that grass layer, I'm going to grab that dark gray color, still using that square blend brush. I'm just adding a little bit of that dark around the edge here where that sidewalk is. I'm going to do the same thing on the sidewalk as well, just to blend these out a little bit more. And this is also where I get rid of the grassy parts I added that I was mentioning earlier. I just was not liking how they looked, and so I'm just going over them real quick. And I'm very lightly blending this in. I'm not pressing too hard on the Apple Pencil there because I just want a little bit of that dark gray color. And now I'm bringing that size of that brush down. I'm just going along the edge here, just adding in the separation like I mentioned earlier, and maybe adding in a few cracks to the sidewalk as well, but I'm just going to add in a little detail, not much, not pressing too hard on that pencil because I just want it to be a soft detail. Now let's go ahead and work on the stairs. I'm grabbing that dark gray color. I'm going to do the face of the stairs here with that dark gray color. Now my stairs accidentally happen to be on 2 different layers, so I have them on the trim layer and also the sidewalk layer. So I'm just going to toggle between those 2 layers to build these up a little bit. But I'm grabbing again that dark gray color and doing the front steps of them. Now I do want it to look like there is railing here in the front, so I'm grabbing that dark red orange, using that square blend brush. I'm just adding in these vertical lines here to give the illusion that there is railing. Now I am touching up the house a little bit because I have a spot here that's missing behind the bushes. But then once we're done with that, we can go move on to the next steps. I'm going to add a little bit of color variation to the trim and the gutters. And then we're going to add in some light, so a glowy street lamp kind of light. And then we're also going to be adding in a vignette around the edge. So I'll show you all how I do that. But right now I'm just grabbing that dark gray color again and adding in some color variation for the trim and the gutters. I'm going darker up underneath where there would be shadows, so up underneath the roof, and I'm just going over the surface of them very lightly with this color to give it a little bit more color variation. I want this house to look a little darker than it does currently. And then I'm not sure if I mentioned already, but I'm going to do the same technique on the gutters as well, but I'm going darker on the bottom of the gutters and lighter towards the top. Now I do kind of want to change the color of the gutters here, so I'm going to go into adjustments and I'm going to brighten it up a little bit, change a little bit of the saturation. It was getting a little too dark. I want these to stand out just a smidgen, not much. Again, we're going to be adding a vignette around the edge of it, of this image, so it's going to darken it up a little bit, but it was just starting to look a little too muddy for me on this house. Same thing with the trim. I'm just going to go and change them around a little bit. I'm actually going to go a little bit darker with the trim, so it's going to be almost that black color, the same as we did with the roof. Now let's go ahead and create a new layer. We're going to add in that glow from above. So I'm putting this layer between the power lines and the bushes here, and I'm using that bright yellow color. Now originally when I was putting the color down, I was kind of following the edge of the house and the bushes. I scrapped that and went more just having a directional brush strokes down towards the trick-or-treater here. So if you want to do it that way, just skip ahead a couple seconds. You'll see what I'm talking about there in a second, but you can also do it this way as well. It just wasn't looking how I wanted it to look, and so I just kind of changed it, which again, you'll see that in a couple seconds. And then once you add this in, I'm going to change the blend mode, and I actually liked hard light for this, so I'm going to set it to hard light, but there's a bunch of different options you can pick from if you don't like that for your specific drawing. And this is where I decided I didn't like the general shape of this, so I'm gonna start drawing it as those rays kind of coming down from that street lamp. And then we can do a Gaussian blur on it if you want to. I also didn't mention this before, but I did turn the opacity down on this layer because I didn't want it to be so bright. So do a Gaussian blur, play around with that opacity until it's about how you want it to look, and then we can move on and add the vignette. And I'm going to erase a little bit of the edge here, so I'm using the soft brush for the erase tool, and I'm just going along the edges just to soften it up to blend it out a little bit more with that background. Now let's go ahead and add that vignette around the edges. I'm going to do a new layer above all of the layers that we've created here, and then I'm grabbing that dark blue color. I'm actually going to go darker with it, so I'm going almost black with that color, grabbing that soft brush, and just very lightly we're going around the edge of this picture here. You want the area where the trick-or-treater is coming up the steps to not have this because you want that to be bright, and that kind of shadowy figure in the window, we want that to be bright, so I'm not coloring over that. I'm just mainly going around the edges and areas I want to darken. Then I'm going to change that blend mode for that. I like multiply. There's other ones that work just as well, but I want to do multiply for this, and then I turn the opacity down just a little. And with that, we are done with our sketch. Thanks so much for sketching along. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you think is waiting behind that glowing door. I'll see everyone in the next video.